What's up everybody, Nidrix here. Now, as someone who has written several college resumes with absolutely no experience trying to create experience out of thin air, I know exactly how you're feeling. And now that I finally have some experience on my resume, I look back at those times when I needed to make a resume because I wanted a job, but I really had nothing to put on it. So today, I'm going to share with you my not so secret tips for writing a college computer science resume with no experience. First and foremost, let's start with some general tips. So I have a strong preference for one-page resumes, as do many people in the industry. However, here's often what happens, and the only reason I know this is because I was guilty of this for 2 whole years in college. You're gonna start brainstorming what you want to put on your resume, and then you're gonna realize that none of it is super amazing. You have like a long list of pretty okay things, and then you'll panic and you'll want to list all of those things in hopes that the person who's reading it sees one of them and kind of resonates with them. And if you do this, you'll end up with a 2-page resume. However, I would strongly caution you against using a 2-page resume. If you have a bunch of experiences, just list the best ones to avoid diluting those best experiences with other experiences. Even if those experiences are only like 5% better than your other ones, just list the ones that are 5% better and exclude the others. Now, not everybody agrees with me on this, and some people actually do have a preference for 2-page resumes, but I think they're wrong. Okay, another tip. So if you have trouble fitting everything into one page, you can try to play with the margins a tiny bit. The margins and the spacing, you can reduce them a little bit. On my first resume, I was guilty of reducing my margins and my spacing so much that it looked absolutely horrible. It kind of looked like one of those exam cheat sheets where you like fit in as much information as possible. Don't do that. If you find yourself doing this, it just means you simply have too much information on your resume, and you should cut out the least relevant information out of what you have. Now some tips on how to make your resume. You can definitely make your resume in Microsoft Word. That's what I did throughout my college career. If you really want to invest time in your resume and make it stand out, I would suggest that you make a latex resume, and a good way to do this is to use Overleaf. It's an online latex editor. Latex is essentially a document preparation system, and it makes the document look super pretty and stuff. A lot of people use this for like research papers and textbooks, so it would make your resume look very, very professional. There's a lot of templates on Overleaf that you can choose from, and although it takes some time to get the hang of writing things in latex, I think it's worth the effort if you really want to make your resume stand out. Speaking of format, this is a completely personal preference thing, but I generally don't like sidebars. I like that everything is in one column and that you can read it top to bottom. I know some people that have been very successful with 2-column resumes, but I'm just a 1-column kind of guy, so that's just my preference. All right, so moving on to the resume sections, let's start with education. I believe education should be at the top of every college student's resume. Here you want to list the school and the program that you're part of, but the first question I always get is, does my GPA matter and should I list it in the education section? To explain this quite simply, GPA does not matter in the sense that if you have a less than stellar GPA, you don't have to list it on your resume, and most people won't care. However, it does matter in the sense that if you have an exceptional GPA, it might be helpful for you to get some jobs, especially if it's an exceptional GPA from like a well-known school, then it might help you a lot. Now, should you list your GPA? Well, I think that really depends on whether you think it hinders or helps your resume. For me personally, I think that any GPA that's above a 3 out of like a scale of 4 is pretty good, and I think in most circumstances, you can list that, and it will help you. Some things I've seen some people do is if they have a really good computer science GPA, like they do well in all their computer science classes, but they like did really poorly in Italian or a social science class, you can list your major GPA or your computer science GPA, where you count only the computer science courses towards that GPA that you list. And this is like a little bit controversial, but it might help you. So if you have a really good computer science GPA, it might be something you want to consider. If you've taken some relevant computer science courses like algorithms, data structures, or operating systems, then you also want to list these courses in this section. This will tell the employer that at least you've heard of these concepts before, so it might put you ahead of some of the competition. Additionally here, if you didn't go to college or you took some additional boot camp or coding courses, that's another thing that you definitely want to list in the education section. Okay, next let's move on to the relevant project section. So in making this video, I'm assuming that you don't have any relevant experience in the industry, but if you do, all these tips apply and this will definitely help you, so absolutely list it. For relevant projects, you can include any school projects that demonstrate your abilities or just seem impressive overall. However, if you have absolutely any projects that you did on the side, something that we call side projects, then you definitely want to list these here. The thing that's beneficial of these side projects over school projects is that it shows that you're hardworking, passionate, and generally interested in computer science, which are some of the most important qualities that employers look for in interns and new hires from college. At the end of the day, in hiring someone from college, they know that you're not going to be an expert programmer right off the get-go, but they want to make sure that you're interested in learning how to become one. So that's why that's so important. Additionally, if you don't have any side projects right now, you might want to consider using some very desirable technologies that are not often covered in computer science curriculums, but are very useful for employers. For example, if you build a small web application using Angular or React, this might really set you apart from other computer science students because these are technologies that are frequently used in the industry, but also they're technologies that you normally don't learn during your computer science curriculum. For projects, you always want to follow the XYZ formula, and it basically goes like this. You accomplished X measured by Y by doing Z. Now you can obviously change the order and the wording of XYZ, but all three of these parts are very important. So here's an example of this. You can say something like, I developed a Sudoku solver that can solve Sudoku puzzles of any difficulty. Pretty good point, right? However, a much stronger point on your resume might be something like, designed and developed a Sudoku solving algorithm in C++ which uses stochastic search to solve all 19,000 sample Sudoku problems in under 1 second. Alright, so now let's talk about work experience that's not computer science related. So this is a little bit controversial because some people think that you should list all the work experience you've had because it demonstrates soft skills that you might have learned, while others think that you should avoid listing anything that's not relevant to computer science. My personal opinion is that you should always prioritize relevant projects or hackathons to non-relevant work. However, if you've done a really unique job that might help you stand out, I think this is something you should list on your resume. For example, I worked as a teaching assistant for a non-computer science course at my university, and while this is obviously not relevant to computer science, I thought it was pretty unique because it was unique at my school for undergrads to be TAs, and also I thought it showed some good leadership skills. However, I did not list the fact that I was a kids tennis coach throughout the summer because I thought this wasn't as relevant. Lastly, let's talk about a skills section. So I normally recommend including a skills section at the bottom of your resume. I normally recommend that you split the languages based on your proficiency. For example, you might put something like proficient in C++ and Java, and I have previous knowledge in Python and JavaScript. That way you differentiate the languages that you're really good at and the languages that you have some experience with. Here you can also list IDEs you're familiar with, like Eclipse, version control, like if you're familiar with Git, and you can even list common software engineering practices that you're familiar with, like unit testing, integration testing, stuff like that. I would caution you here to look to avoid listing anything that every applicant can put down. So I typically recommend that people avoid listing stuff like Microsoft Word, which every applicant can put down, and also avoid listing things that are not super relevant to the job you're applying for. So some people like to put like an extracurriculars or other interest section at the bottom of their resume, and I certainly don't think this will make or break your resume, but I think it's not a bad idea. If you have some particularly interesting hobbies that might resonate with the person who's reading your resume, it might give you like a little bit of a bonus point, although as I said, I don't think it's like a make or break for your resume. So these are basically my main tips for writing a college resume with no experience. If you have questions, make sure you ask them below in the comments section. I will respond to all the questions you ask. Other than that, make sure you subscribe to the channel so that you can get hopefully some useful tech information and definitely some tech humor if you're interested in that kind of stuff. Hit the like button to help me with the YouTube algorithm because that's always appreciated. And other than that, I hope you have a fabulous day and I'll see you in the next video.